Our next segment here is with Dee Childers, who we introduced just a minute ago. And Dee, I thought we had a great conversation. And and I hope other people thought we had a great conversation.
You besides you and me and
Yeah, that would be great if they also got something of it. And so, Dee, what we're thinking here is for you to kind of take the floor and walk us through having the talk. And I know they're different talks, but this one's the talk. And I don't know that families typically do the talk. They tend to wait until we're really late in the game. And then it seems to me that there's a lot of pressures that are now there that didn't have to be or weren't there earlier. And maybe the talk doesn't go as well. So take us through that. Let's have the talk and let's start, let's start this conversation. What do we need to do?
do it. Let's do it. So I think one of the first things is to not think of it as an event.
Mm,
It's not like the talk that we have with our kids when they get to adolescence and we need to have that talk where it might, even then it should probably be more of a process. But the
yes. Yeah.
the way to have these conversations, I think, is so much more helpful and better received when it's not an event and it's not at a crisis time. That is kind of our default. I don't know what I don't know, and so I'm going to avoid it until I have to, and then they realize, as was in our case, I mean, I'm a living example of this, is that we could see the signs, we could see things coming, and we didn't do our homework. And we did a little bit because both parents who had dementia had their legal documents, and that was as far as our talk went. So I think starting the talk early and figuring out ways to have a conversation. And a conversation is two ways and it does pick up. And so I think those are a couple of things that are really key to this. A conversation is two ways,
Do
not
we do we need to wait until we're perfect at having the talk? We know everything that we're supposed to know and then have the talk?
well, I mean, there's some of us that are like that. And I think that was what got in my way because I am a perfectionist, but it was not helpful. And so what I would say is that I think it's to your benefit to not worry about being the expert and actually just kind of using that as part of your entrance into the conversation or a conversation. Holiday times are great times to start that because typically, at least other than maybe this year, we're around each other and we're having a nice time. um, any time that you get together is a good time, and I do think that it's helpful to have these type of conversations in person
Yeah.
because body language is very important. We communicate much more about what's going on with us non-verbally than we do verbally. We can be saying, yes, I want to do that.
Of course,
And
of course I'll do that. Whatever you say.
exactly. And so in person is helpful, a time when things are not stressful, that there's no other, timed agenda that has to be accomplished. And so starting early, I think, is probably one of the best things that I can give is to start early. And it doesn't always have to be the adult child to with the parents. Sometimes it's the parents with the adult children need to have the
Yes.
conversations.
Yes, absolutely.
And sometimes it's the kids that don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think about it because they
Yeah.
go to them dying. Well, there's a lot of things a lot of life between now and dying. So to find a time that works for everybody to approach, and whoever it is that says, let's start talking about this and being prepared. And it can be the entry can be even using this conference today. Hey, I was at a conference this week, and we'll just go from the adult child standpoint. And I there was quite a bit I learned during that conference, and I was just wondering if you'd be willing to talk about some of the things that I learned. One example. Another example might be, Katie, my best friend. Well, let me tell you what happened with her. Her parents, and there's this crisis and this drama that's unrolling. And gosh, mom and dad, I really don't want to find ourselves in a crisis like that. Would you be willing? And so you see there, I'm asking for permission there.
Yeah.
Would you be willing is a really respectful way to start. It allows them space because they might say, no, I don't want to talk about that right now. Would you be willing to talk about it in the future? Yes. Okay. Well, maybe next time I visit. So you can kind of
Right.
take small baby steps. It doesn't just because you've decided today is you want to have the conversation. You've been preparing for this. They haven't.
Yep.
So give them space, give them room, and give them an opportunity to give permission or not. Um,
So when you say this,
mhm,
you say I'm taking it then, if we've got children, not just
mhm,
me, but we've got children,
mhm.
um, that would be best to get everybody involved in this conversation.
Well, certainly, ultimately, it would. Families are, families are unique. And so each family situation is going to be a bit different, and one needs to understand that. In the best of all worlds, it would be great if the kids had an opportunity, the adult children had the opportunity to maybe talk amongst themselves first and say, what are you seeing? What do you think? And try and get on the same page. That would be optimal. Not always realistic. Sometimes somebody's far away, or just even the child in town. I don't want to have that conversation with mom and dad. I'm just not going to do it. Doesn't mean that the conversation doesn't need to happen. So I think you have to look at the circumstance, invite people to participate. And if they're willing and able to, then great. But that does not mean that the conversation shouldn't happen if they're not. It still
Got it.
needs to happen. So
So you could
starting,
start the same way with your siblings that you were talking about, starting with the parents. Oh yeah, I
correct.
don't want to talk about that right now.
Yeah,
When would be a
right,
good time? Next time we talk.
right. And sometimes it's then and I understand I come from a therapeutic background, but it's these are great little opening phrases. Help me understand what's
Got
causing
it.
you to not want to do this,
Yeah.
and then be willing to hear them out, hear the process. Well, this just happened to my husband's father, and it was a, excuse the term, shit show or whatever it was. And I don't want to go there. And then you have an opportunity to explore. So those tools all through this process can be very helpful. Asking for permission, asking for could you help me understand? Could you tell me more about that? Are all tools to help you in these conversations. And then you gain whatever consensus that you can, and hopefully at some point in time you create a time. Maybe it's a time you're already coming together. Maybe you decide, hey, let's just do this on a Saturday morning, and let's get everybody around the table and have breakfast or coffee or whatever. But a safe place with permission is pretty key.
So one thing that you're saying that's driving me a little bit crazy, because
It's a short trip.
this this takes time. This could
Yes.
take forever to make it work out.
Yeah, you can't start this conversation too early. And one of the things that's so interesting for me right now, I have two new clients this last week, and that the adult children are having to do the intervention are 22 and 24 in one situation with a 60-year-old father, and the other is a 29-year-old with a 65-year-old. So I mean, your circumstances, you never know
Yeah.
exactly. So the bottom line is it's really not too early to have this conversation at any point. The point is recognize it's a conversation that needs to have. And if you can integrate it just into the family system and conversations that you have periodically, then it's normalized and it's not such a big deal.
Well, yeah. So again, it's going to take some time. So waiting until the weekend before, we got to do something because dad's in the hospital or mom's, now in rehab. What if I can't get the other kids or another sibling involved in this? You got some suggestions? If it's just me, I'm the only one, and the rest of the family's just not going to do it, or just my sister's not going to do it?
Well, in the best of all worlds, you need to move ahead and you need to ask the persons that aren't going to participate real time. Would you like me to keep you updated? Would you
Mm,
like to hear how it comes out? I'd be happy to give you information. That so there's ways to kind of tease them in if they can see that it's not going to be a horrible experience. That it's you want it to be unemotionally uncharged emotionally. So that's a big piece of it. And sometimes in family systems, that's how they normally communicate. So people avoidance and denial is our number one line of defense.
yeah,
My parents aren't getting old, my parents aren't going to get sick, they're not going to die.
yeah.
But we know that's not true. So to work ourselves through it. So there's plenty of opportunity to invite in and re-engage at any point in time. And then there's families that are just, there's just these divides where there's an outlier and you're not going to get them to participate. They're not going to join. You can ask if they want information or not. And you go with that.
So in our profession, blended families can raise some really interesting issues. I'm guessing it's the same in what you're trying to do. Blended
Oh my
families
goodness.
can. I've seen some lovely, lovely situations. I had a little lady in, and it was her stepdaughter that brought her in, and the mom looked at me. She goes, "Oh no, this is my daughter. This is my daughter." And so I'm not saying that every situation is that way, but they can present some really interesting issues.
And especially if it's a later in life marriage. I mean, we know that this has been taken to extremes in some cases, with one parent becoming demented, and you know intimacy, and my stepfather is taking advantage of her. So there's all sorts of things that can happen, and yet that was a marital relationship. So as best as possible, good relationships among the siblings, and even conversations, just what are your thoughts about this, and to hear each other. So listening is probably more important than speaking, which is normally the case in conversation. we, we
And
don't
something that not all of us are really good at.
Well, especially if it's emotionally charged, and there's usually some charge around this.
Yeah.
So paying attention to what's going on with yourself and your own fears, um, and being aware that you have issues, and that other folks have their own issues. So then, can we agree on a common goal? And the common goal is the best for mom and dad.
Right.
So
And
that would be key.
sometimes this is, I think, a difficulty is sometimes mom and dad don't agree with you on what's best for them.
Yes, that's very true. So it's just like in any situation, you have to agree. You have to come to some support place um, that you can find common ground on. So don't take the biggest issue on at first.
Very
Get
good.
small, get small wins under your belt. So we're going to move you out of your house, and we're going to move you to New Jersey, and put you
And
in
we're
a
going to
high
sell the
rise.
house. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Don't do that one first. Come at it. Take the lower hanging fruit first. Maybe it's just shoring up the home a little bit with some home safety stuff. Um,
S-
taking
s-
out the carpet, picking up
Oh,
rugs.
yeah.
those could be your first wins. So you want to build wins. So this is a process. This isn't an event.
Very good. You've said that now a couple of times, and I understand what you're saying. Been there. So let's assume for a moment that we've got everybody kind of sitting down. We're having this discussion, and you're talking, you know, a common goal here would be what's best for mom and dad. Can you give us some conversation starters, some things that we could open with?
Well, it's kind of as I mentioned a little bit ago. Use something not directly related to them. It's, I was at this conference and I learned this happened to my friend. I saw this happen to a colleague. And I really want to make sure that that's not something that happens to us. And so you can, you know, paint the picture outside first
Right.
and just say clearly my hope here, and maybe even leave the word goal out at this point in time. My hope is that we can find a way that meets your goals and objectives and the things that are important to you, as well as things that are important to us, which are, you know, that you're safe and that you're um, have the best that you can to live a good life. And I think that's an excellent place to start. What is a good life look like to you?
Very good.
Yeah, yeah, because it's might not be what we think. We project onto other people our own stuff, and so always is helpful to find out what is important to you, most important. And you know, they'll initially they may do the usual things. Well, I want to live and die in my house. I was like,
Yes.
well, you know, okay, so don't let that be your roadblock. Okay.
Let's not
So
shut down right there.
no, because it's just the start of the dialogue. And that's the first thing that comes to mind. And often what I experience is as we kind of explore in more detail what's important to them, it's really not the house so much as the independence, as the
Yes.
connection to community. Because really, aging in place, it kind of has two different, well, it has multiple different perspectives, but it's not always about living and aging in the house that you raised your children in. And maybe it's being in your own home separate. Well, you know, there's communities that have your own home and yet you're still connected to a community. There is other ways to shore people up. So I think you really want to explore what that looks like. And so now you begin to see, yep, start this early. It's not a one-time conversation. This is going to take some time. And that will also, I think, help reduce everybody's anxiety, because this is kind of a highly charged conversation. So take the charge out of it by going in very small bites.
Well, and keep the charge from coming back in by not issuing ultimatums or edicts. No, mom, that isn't going to work. Because I think that's probably a conversation killer right there, and it brings all that emotion back in
Right.
that
Exactly.
that you've worked so hard to get out.
Yeah. Well, and adult children forget that, or they don't even think about it, that just because someone makes a bad decision doesn't mean they can't make decisions. That we are entitled. I mean, I've made bad decisions at multiple places in my life. There's good reason to believe I might make some additional bad decisions. So
Well,
that
it,
doesn't mean you don't have the capacity to make decisions.
correct. And just from a little tangent on this, if we go over to the court to do a conservatorship, and the reason that you're asking the judge to appoint a conservator for mom and dad is that they're making bad decisions, he won't grant it. He needs to know that they're incapable of making good decisions. If he finds out they can make good decisions, they just didn't, he's not going to be involved. And that drives the kids crazy. It just absolutely does. well, but he's doing this and he's doing that. The judge is going, yep, well, he can. It's his life.
His or her money, whatever it is. But that there's fine lines, as we both know, there about the nefariousness of some
I
people
know.
who come into
Yeah.
take advantage. And while it seems, you know, the 24 and 22-year-old father gave $90,000 to a woman that he's never met, that's his girlfriend.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Well, and so I get this. So from the legal side, I'm looking at that going, well, that's not a really good decision. Does it indicate they can't make good decisions?
Right. So in
Or
isolation, no.
correct? Yeah.
Right.
And so context, I would guess, is a pretty big part of all of these conversations. We need to understand context.
Right. Absolutely, context is important.
Yeah.
So in
So,
this case, this family, this man has all of these other things that go along with that, many other bad
yes,
decisions that are affecting his quality of life, affecting his health, his
correct.
safety. But that's exactly right, Mark, in
And,
context.
and so a judge would look at that and say, oh, no, we don't have just this one in isolation, and that wasn't a good thing, and we're going to try to get that fixed best we can. But if that's a consistent theme, then the judge could determine from all of that that this person needs some help. So, yeah. So we as kids, we're sitting a little bit as the judge in this, and that's something that I thank you for bringing that up. In that, you know what, it's their life. Maybe this is the way they want to do it. And I've seen the kids in my office telling their parent that that's not right. You can't do that. And it is at that point that I kick the kids out of the office and visit with mom and dad. And that doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. So let's say that they just can't get this going, or they can get mom and dad to sit down, and the other kids, and we just have a mess as far as, well, what's the right thing to do and how do we take care of mom and dad? Is this a time to call that third party? Is this a time to call D and say, D, we could sure use some help? And is this a good time to kind of bring the third person in who maybe is not as emotionally involved in all the stories?
Yes, it certainly can be. And we can do it in a number of ways. We can be present, and sometimes we're hired to coach and consult and say, give them feedback, so we're kind of educating, whether it be the parents in rare occasions, but certainly the adult children in the majority of times, which
Yeah,
is to educate them along those lines, is that if your parents have the capacity to make decisions, they get to make bad decisions just like you do. And and you need to recognize that this is still their lives. So yes, so we're love to do this kind of work to help families work through this process, um, and whether it's with them or behind the scenes.
so let's have you involved then in any one of our little scenarios that we talked about. um and we've got let's take Henry, and his daughter is Rebecca, is clear across the country. Guide us through how you would guide the conversation or this discussion, and maybe how you would approach it. For example, would you, if Rebecca called you, would you talk to her first and kind of figure out where she is? Just kind of walk us through how that would look.
Absolutely. I Whoever calls, I mean, that's a reach out for help. And that's a great thing. And so lots of reinforcement for asking for help and for input, and just kind of talk her through, and what's going on, what are the goals, what have you done, what have you not done, what do you know, what do you not know, and then paint some provide some options. I mean, the beauty about where we're at right now, if we can find beauty, is that we're all used to doing meetings across the country or
Yeah,
wherever via Zoom. And so I have some great family meetings on Zoom,
yeah,
and talk about the kinds of things that have come up. And so, like I said, if she wants to maybe do the first steps, what I find they often want is suggestions from us about how to proceed, and then them going to their parent and saying, I'd like to bring in this company. This is what they do to help us navigate things that we don't really know about in today's world. So Henry might have helped his parents and his
Yes.
grandparents, but it's a very different world today.
Yeah.
And so, knowing your experiences, Dad, but knowing how the world has changed, I'd be wondering if you'd be willing to have a conversation with the three of us. And let's talk about some of this stuff so that we can make sure that your goals and needs are met, and that my goals and needs are met, quite honestly.
Yeah, and this is who I am. I don't know everybody's the same way, but I would want to make sure that Dad understood that I'm concerned and I want this to work out because of my love for him, right?
Yes.
I want
Yes.
the best for him. Dad, this is important. And it just seems to me that needs to be communicated back and forth.
Absolutely. This is coming from a place of love and concern.
Right.
And
And
and the best. I want the best that we can arrange for
yeah.
you. And part of that means, what do you want?
Well, and so that was going to be my next step, to kind of get us into that. How do you, I mean, you got two different people. Let's keep it at two because we've only got so much time.
Well, again, I think we do bites. We do bites because there's a lot to talk about. There's a
Yeah.
lot, so maybe one of the first things is, Dad, I'd like to know if you've done a will or a trust. Have you done powers of attorney for healthcare and finance? And could we talk about that, and who are those people? And if I'm named on them, would you be willing to give me a copy of those documents so that I could step up and serve in that capacity? So there's different topics that need to come up, and one of them is what's going on from a legal
Right.
standpoint. And if not, then maybe that's one of the first action items. Well, Dad, we know those are important things that need to occur. What do you think about finding an attorney that you're comfortable working with? And let's start getting those estate planning documents done, and those powers of attorney done, because and as we explain, and we've educated everybody that without those documents, it can be very difficult for
Yes.
any part of the system to let the other person in.
Yeah.
um, I had a client several years ago, married for 50 years, and he went, and they had a trust, but they didn't have powers of attorney. And he's in
Yeah.
rehab, and she couldn't turn off her cable because she wasn't on the account
Yeah.
and she didn't have power of attorney. She couldn't change the cable in her own house. That was the most crazy thing. And it's like, that's how basic it is, people. You have to have been given the authority to do these things in the event things need to be done. So, that would be one of the first things that I'd look at.
Well,
Probably
for a
this.
couple of reasons, I like that, of course, because I'm an attorney and this is what I do. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
yeah, yeah.
And people need this. So don't get me wrong. It's not
No,
just selfish on my
of
part.
course not.
It
It's not
is, but
selfish.
it's not the only thing. But the second part to me, and I think you mentioned this, is, hey, let's take a step. Anything. Let's, yeah, you're talking about getting some wins. This could be a win, but it's not just a win. It's Dad thinking in a particular direction and taking a first step.
It's a
Because
step
we're all that way.
forward.
Sometimes the hardest thing is to get that first step. Once we get that done, then the second step is not quite so difficult. And then the third. Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of, that there's less volatility there than where are you going to live.
Oh my
You know,
goodness.
I
Yeah.
would save that one for down the road, about
So
what you want.
so then you kind of walk us through then. What are some of the other steps or wins, if you will, before we even approach that conversation about, well, come move to, New Jersey, because he's not even considering moving out of the house. So tell us maybe, and be free with facts as you need to be.
Well, I think the second one I would come after, and again, it depends if there's
Yeah,
there's a hot button that's come up, then that's going to drive your first effort.
yeah.
So it could be medical, and if it's not a hot button, then I would say I would look at talking about what's going on medically. What's your health, Dad? What's
And in this case with Henry, we had the diabetes, and he's a
right?
little bit concerned about his memory. So this would be a good place. What you're saying is be a good place to go.
Right. So, understanding what his A1C is. How often does he see an endocrinologist, or who is treating his diabetes? Um, is he on medication, and is it oral medication or is it injectable
I,
medication? Is it once a day or twice a day? Does he have to do his monitoring before he eats when he gets up to see what his blood sugar is? So those things, if he's on a sliding scale for insulin, that's far more complicated,
yeah,
and requires much higher thinking and mental capacity than taking one of your medications in the morning.
yeah.
But even that, and I'll tell you, it's away from Henry, but Henry is as independent as B was. B was a retired nurse, and
They're not independent
when I
or in
got
control.
no, when I saw B for the first time, a nurse, had not taken her insulin for 6 months.
Oh my goodness.
She was so close to dying. It was
Yeah,
scary. And so that was because there were some memory issues. But interesting, and see, that this is why you can't get freaked out. Once we got her diabetes under control again, we got her memory back. She did
oh my
not
goodness.
have
Yeah,
dementia from Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. Hers was due to some other things that were going on in her system, and the insulin was a key part of that. So, understanding that we have to understand, what are the diagnosis? Do you like your providers? Are they helpful? Do they listen to you?
yeah.
Would you be willing to invite me to your next meeting, even if it's on Zoom? You
Zoom.
know, I mean, before this meeting, I went to the doctor with my sister, literally, because she needs to have another knee replacement.
Oh,
I have the son in Chicago who was at the neurologist yesterday with my client. So, I mean, it's like a whole different world where that we might have like freaked out about that before. This is very common. So people can participate remotely and start building a relationship with a primary care physician, because if they are the right care physician, you want to build a relationship with
right.
them. So that at the very least, you can give them information always.
Yeah,
And if you have a release of information or they're the power
yeah,
of attorney, then they can give you information back. But build the relationship with the healthcare provider. And if they're not good, then you talk about, are you happy? Maybe we should change. And that's not uncommon. Maybe they were a family doctor and great for so long, but we need somebody that's
yeah.
more of an internal medicine
Right.
specialist.
Or
So
somebody with a background in geriatrics.
exactly,
Yeah,
preferably.
yeah.
Those are very hard to come by in Boise,
Yeah,
uh, but yes. So understanding disease states, the practitioner, and then medications,
yeah.
um, what medications are you taking them is a really good question.
Yes, it is. Well, and one of the things that's dawning on me here, Dee, as we talk about this, is that it's now a collaborative process, right? The process that we are in now is collaborative. It's not contentious. This is not, I want this, you want that. This is now
Right.
collaborative. And if we've spent the time, I think is what you're telling me, if we spent the
Mhm,
time and the effort, then
mhm.
mom or dad, and in this case, we've got Henry, we're on the same page. We're trying to get to the same place. Now, we may see that a little bit differently, but at least we're working together. And this is not the daughter telling him what to do, and this is not him telling her where to go.
Right.
We're,
Right.
we're kind of working together, which has really strengthened the relationship.
Exactly. You become a partner. I
Yes,
like to talk about, and I use the word team a lot when I'm working with families. This is Team Henry, you know, and the daughter's part of the team. If there's a care manager, they're part of the team. The doctors are part of the team. And so to continue to use that phraseology really helps strengthen that this is not a single person event.
right.
This is a team. And we can kick people off the team and we can bring new people on the team.
There's only a couple of people we can't really kick off. And
Right.
that would be dad and the daughter. We probably need them both on there, but everybody
Preferably.
else is expendable.
Right, right, absolutely. I had one client, he told his kids, so it was a blended family, 3 and 3. And that one tasked my skills to the max. There was times I was literally afraid. But he sat them down and he said, I want you to understand, she's the coach, I'm the team owner. You do
There
what
you
the
go.
coach says,
Yeah,
so that kind of gave them a groundwork for how this thing was going to play out. If you want to
interesting.
play, if you want to be on the team, you got to listen to what the coach says.
Yeah.
So
Oh, very good. Very good.
yeah.
So approaching then this kind of the big decision, is it still that big of a decision? Because, we've got these little steps in there. We've hit a couple of singles and maybe a double, and we're we're working together. Help us understand maybe, and this is a risk. So people that if you're watching this and you start here, I'll spank you. All right. I'll come and I'll slap you down. Don't do this.
Oh, you talk.
But if we got there, how would you approach this then, this discussion between I live out in New Jersey and I would love dad to come, or maybe she says it differently. He's got to come live out here. And he's sitting there going, I'm not going to New Jersey. You guys got nothing for me out here. This is where I am. Help us with that conversation, assuming that we've kind of worked our way there. We didn't just start here.
Well, I think it's really helpful to do your very best to avoid questions that can be answered no.
Mm,
So, Dad, would you consider just coming out for a visit? Well, he might say, no, I'm not coming for a visit, but it's not, no, I'm not moving.
right.
So you start with someplace, would you be willing to explore options?
Yeah.
Well, most people are willing to explore options. So I hear what you want. You kind of have an idea of what I want, but let's just explore our options here and gather more information again. And I'll come there and we'll explore there. And if you would be willing to come here and explore, then we're both well informed about options, and then we're better able to make a path forward.
I've got a lady, her parents were clients of mine, and she has a really nice situation out in Washington, D.C.
Hmm.
And the folks have lived here for a while, but this was not home. This was, they moved here well into retirement and they have nothing here anymore.
Hmm.
And dad was working a little bit into the dementia. You could see some memory issues, but both sides had the courage to have the conversation. And mom and dad had the courage to go look, just to go out to the East Coast, out to Maryland, and, kind of just have a look. They didn't make any commitments other than to go and have the visit. And then I got a phone call that said, we found a place. We like it. Our daughter's half hour away. We really like that. we're gonna give it a go. We're gonna try. So I was
Wonderful.
very happy for them because it seemed that they all were on the same page. And it was not like the daughter says you have to, have to, have to, but she approached it from, like you said, would you be willing to explore some options? And they said, well, yes, we would. Would you be willing to come out and visit me? You know, and she's got a situation where they could live with her, but I think all three of them understood that it wasn't going to be, you know,
Wasn't in
good.
anybody's best interest.
Yeah. And so she said, hey, listen, there's a number of places not far from here. We could just go look. You know, you could just kind of see what it looks like. And, you know, here's where we are. And they did. They went out. They had a good visit. They were there for 2 or 3 weeks and, you know, got some of these visits in. And that's the last I heard is that they had moved and they were going to sell their place here. And actually it turns out that both of their daughters, the one daughter is somewhat estranged, not completely, but her 2 daughters were thrilled to have grandpa and grandma pretty close. They were really close. So that was a win. But I think they did what you were talking about. Here's the first win, here's the second, and they did not approach from the beginning that, oh, this is what we're doing. Very good.
And you know, a piece of that is so many of the folks that we're talking about, not the 60-year-olds necessarily, but the 70, the 80, 90-year-olds, they've only known the nursing home. They don't know
And
about ALS and,
yeah,
you know, the IALs and they
yeah,
don't know that there's different levels and the quality. I mean, some of these places are freaking incredible.
yeah.
And so that's the other part of the invitation. Just let's go have lunch.
So
Let's just go see a free
lunch,
lunch. You should always
lunch
eat when
is,
you go check it out.
yeah,
Yeah.
lunch is huge. I've told you that story about my mother-in-law. She was there for lunch and she tried to pick up the dishes and my wife goes, no, Mom, they take care of that. And she just looked at her husband and said, I'm gonna like it here. I think that decision got made right there.
Exactly.
Hey, well, listen, we gotta shut this down. We got a couple other things coming up. We're gonna take a quick break, and then we've got some videos. Um, Carly in my office worked with some folks to help us do a video, and they're gonna look at a home and maybe give us some ideas on how to make it safer, which, you know, is one of those steps that we can take. And, you know, we don't need to go from here to there. We could say, oh, well, you know, this is a situation, we could make this a little bit safer. And you know what, the bathroom is a huge place that it could make a difference. So the Divine Miss D, thank you as always. You're just awesome. We appreciate your support. We appreciate you taking this time. And thank you, thank you, thank you. We're going to step
My
into,
pleasure.
oh, we just love to have you. We're going to step into a break. I've been told to remind people to check our website. It's called www.aginginplaceidaho.com. 10 minutes, maybe a little short time for making a sandwich, but grab something to eat. And then we're going to watch a couple of videos, and we're talking about home safety and preventing falls, which hits home with me, and where I've been. So thank you, thank you, thank you.